Since the U.S. election, a UK data scientist has been uncovering what she calls suspicious cases relating to the vote counting system. She says she found that votes were added unexpectedly and even taken away. We spoke with her to hear about what she suspects is going on.
Data scientist Sarah Eaglesfield says she discovered unusual changes in vote counts in several states during the 2020 election. According to her research, nearly 60 counties across the United States had ballots removed from the total count after they've been counted. She said that the changes in data indicate the vote counting software, known as Dominion Voting Systems, is flawed.
I don't think the vote counting software is fit for purpose. I've seen counts that go down, I've seen votes going missing, and I've seen ballots that have been counted 2, 3, maybe 4 times. Therefore, I think that the software, which Texas did not approve, has got many faults that should have been investigated prior to this election going ahead.
Based on her analysis, ballots in Wayne County, Michigan were counted more than once. Numbers showed that ballots with the same voter ID appeared several times in the vote counting software. She explained she feels the discrepancies combined with evidence of dead voters make it impossible for anyone to determine what the real election results were.
Any news or any figures that have been fed back to you, they might be accurate within a few 100,000. But they're not going to be the accurate result for the state unless it's been a hand count. And I think that all the states do need to audit what they are turning over.
Sarah also said that it's integral for a fair election to report accurate figures.
If you can't have an accurate counting system, you can't have an accurate election. If you can't have an accurate election, then you're just randomly choosing who's going to be your next president.
Lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign in the battleground states are still pending. Don Tran, NTD News.
Victor Davis Hanson, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, sat down with American thought leaders to discuss the presidential election and how the left has been putting pressure on society. NTD's Christina Kim has more details.
Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, a professor and a conservative pundit. He spoke about how pollsters, the internet, and new election rules have reversed the concept of what it was to be an American. He said the traditional idea of America acknowledges that its people are individuals who personally take the initiative to learn about the issues and go out to vote. This election, he says, with mail-in voting, the American voter was sought out, pampered, and massaged to vote according to the wishes of the elite. In this election, millions voted before the final presidential debate or the Hunter Biden scandal, when typically these people would have been able to see all of that crucial information before they cast their ballots. Hanson also said that the media was dominated by inaccurate polls, which can paralyze voters from coming out to the polls because they think the results are already determined. He said that despite Democrats underperforming in the House and Senate, no polls were able to predict that, and none predicted that Trump would lead.
We've never had this before where you have pollsters who do all of these analytics and then they, in concert, create a narrative that one candidate has no chance to win when they know their methodology is flawed because it's flawed from the record of 2016 and they know it's flawed. And yet they feel that the poll is not to reflect public opinion but to change it in a predetermined way. That's new.
Hanson continued, saying it was even more disturbing that Silicon Valley is adjudicating which type of ad should be on social media. This selective censoring really distorts reality, which is very Orwellian. He also said that the media has gotten so obsessed with President Trump that they became entirely unhinged. Hanson said that in essence, Trump has unveiled the true nature of corporate media because people openly admit we are biased and we're biased because we have to stop Donald Trump. And despite compelling evidence, prevent the Hunter Biden files from circulating, blaming it on the specter of Russian disinformation.
He was some type of touchstone where anything that he got near revealed the true essence of what we all suspected, but we knew that they would never be revealed. He was a cipher. We've seen a new dimension of reality that Donald Trump brought about. He really tore off the curtain and said, these guys have these little gears and that Oz thing on the screen is just completely false.
Saying President Trump has a pathway to victory, Hanson said that the president would need to win Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona if he loses Michigan and Wisconsin. Currently, he says the Trump campaign's efforts are outsourced and disjointed, and it needs to become unified and focused. According to him, this is especially the case because Democratic nominee Joe Biden is going against his promise and claiming victory before the votes have been independently certified and before the Electoral College votes.
And they're putting enormous pressure on the Supreme Court, and they're trying to win public opinion. And Donald Trump has a legal problem to get a fair vote, but he also has a political problem. Every day that he doesn't get massive evidence or a win in Georgia or Arizona, then the American public shrugs and says, I guess Biden is president.
Calling Trump a tragic hero, he said that the president didn't do all the things he was accused of and did a lot of good things and never got credit. He said most of his legacy will either not be appreciated by the American people or adopted by Joe Biden, predicting that if Biden assumes office, the media will immediately promote the idea of a Biden vaccination that was really made under Trump, and a Biden recovery being the end to the Trump virus and Trump lockdown. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Political groups in the U.S. have become strikingly similar to communist revolutionaries' tactics in Russia and China. An expert explains.
A Democratic Socialist Congresswoman's recent Twitter post is sparking controversy. She's asking people to archive supporters of President Trump. A former Obama administration official wrote in a now-deleted post that the so-called Trump Accountability Project is doing just that, which tracks every administration staffer, everyone who has supported Trump. Joshua Phillip is an investigative journalist with the Epoch Times and the host of Crossroads. He said this phenomena, as well as some strategies used by political groups in the U.S. today, echo the actions of communist movements when they tried to seed revolution. One strategy communists use is to create public enemies.
What we can look at is the pattern of development for movements like this. In other words, the social creation of state enemies, the social creation of an ideology that certain parts of society are absolutely evil and should be eliminated. For example, the left calling all Trump supporters Nazis, or the far right, instead of understanding, well, look, like half the country voted for him, over 70 million people. Would it be fair to say that those 70 million people are all Nazis? Is this really how people interpret reality? But these are the narratives being pushed by the big tech and big media.
Speaking of a list, in 1949, right before the Chinese Communist Party was about to take power in China, the party's mouthpiece Xinhua published a list of the so-called war criminals who were supporters of the ruling Chinese Kuomintang Party. The CCP said the list was created by the Chinese people and that those on the list are killable by all the people of the country.
Now, in the United States, we see similar things budding, and they're not fully running yet, but they're budding. That may seem benign to some people who don't like Trump, but what's the result of that in the long run? What is the historical lesson from that? This should be regarded as political terrorism, because the act of doing so is to suppress people based on political ideas. It's singling out people for their beliefs, for their viewpoints, and for engaging in normal democratic processes.
The second strategy used by communists is taking control of the media.
Communist movements typically did take over the media, right? A lot of the original socialist and communist movements also ran newspapers.
Before the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin used German money to buy newspaper companies, as well as starting over a dozen new outlets. Through these papers, Lenin made promises of peace and bread to the Russian people, which disrupted the judgment of people who were suffering under the First World War and shifted public opinion in his favor. Another strategy is to censor dissidents and create fear, and if necessary, justify the use of violence.
Now, Lenin, first off, was part of a terrorist movement. The Bolsheviks were, for example, assassinating police, carrying out assassinations, killings, beatings, you name it. Programs like this to eliminate individuals in society who are deemed state enemies based on programs exactly like what's happening in the U.S., oftentimes develop slowly. And you can look at the social hatred, the level of hatred some people have already, to the extent that already a lot of people justify, for example, what Antifa is doing. A lot of people already justify political violence. There are many people in our society who think that burning down your community and looting stores is somehow justified. They can turn a blind eye to the violence and they can say, oh, well, this is just us trying to make a political statement. How dare you try to say this is wrong?
But he said historically, after communists took power, the people who helped them instigate violence are often the first to be abandoned by them.
The groups they've used to cause all the problems are usually the first they destroy. They're the first ones lined up against the wall. They're the first ones thrown in the gulags. They're the first ones gotten rid of because they are elements for destabilization. But once the communists take over, once the socialists take over, they no longer need destabilization. They need a return to normalcy.
He said to counter such a type of subversion, people need to speak up and speak the truth.
One of the best things they've always used for their own interest is silence of people who they are targeting. What we see developing in this country between big tech, big media, and violent groups like Antifa are three wings of the same basic system, trying to suppress every individual American, trying to make you be quiet, and trying to stop you from expressing your beliefs. Don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to call it out. I'd say don't become like them. Don't fall into their trap and become violent just like them, because they'll use it. This is what they do. They want you to fight on the streets violently. They want you to engage with them like that, because if you do that, they can use it to push their own narratives even further. But what they don't want you to do is to speak out, to expose them, and to use truth to condemn them. And so I would urge everybody to not be afraid to speak out. Do not let them silence you.
Penny.